When does death begin? When does life end? Where is the thin strand between these two, and what's on the other side? Welcome to The Preacher Played, Death Stranding. As I was playing, I observed that the in-game struggle to grapple with the fine line between life and death mirrors our own. Death Stranding is Hideo Kojima's creation of a long, overburdened stroll through a post-apocalyptic America. You play the role of Sam Porter Bridges. Sam is a porter, taking packages of both large and small size to the last survivors of a supernatural cataclysm. It has been called a walking simulator, a delivery simulator, and a movie pretending to be a video game. All I can tell you is that I found it remarkably addictive and compelling enough to make me want to play it again and again. I've had multiple playthroughs of Death Stranding, both the original as well as the director's cut. I've pretty much done every mission, found every data chip, read every email, and trudged every mile more than once. I also loved all of it. As I've done so, I've tried to think about the worldview of the game and maybe, just maybe, find a lens into the minds behind the game. I am a Christian pastor in real life who has personally traversed the barren vistas of atheism and its non-committal cousin, agnosticism, to become who I am today. I am theologically trained, biblically centered, and unapologetic about it. I'm also a gamer who just likes to play games. I like being able to sit down in the evening, fire up my computer, and blow off steam. But somewhere between carrying too much weight or throwing my blood at ghosts, I find myself thinking about the worldview and the theology of the games I play. I've addressed those concepts with a couple of focused yet brief videos you can see here on your screen and linked in the description below. Every video game is created by people who want you to experience their world with a particular worldview. And the character introduction process builds that worldview for you so that you will act like a person who belongs in the universe they create. In Lies of P, for example, you're supposed to think like a puppet with the ability to lie. In Death Stranding, you're supposed to think like a package carrier who just wants to be left alone in a post-apocalyptic world. In the various iterations of Dark Souls, you're just trying not to go hollow. And many of our favorite games dabble with varying degrees of intentionality and theology. They can't help it. It just happens because everyone is a theologian. The name of the game, Death Stranding, tells us that we're dropping into a world centered around death. That brings us to the word for the day, Thanatology. Thanatology derives from the Greek word for death, thanatos, and logos, or word. Thus, Thanatology is the study of death and the practices associated with it. A thanatologist will study death from the physical, the ethical, spiritual, medical, sociological, and psychological viewpoints. In other words, they consider death from every direction possible. Thanatology is the study of death. Like any good study, you have to establish the boundaries, the terminus on either end. How far out does the study go? When does death begin, and when and where does it end? Enter the world of Death Stranding. While in our day-to-day life, death is treated as a taboo, treated mysteriously, and forgotten or ignored as quickly as we're able, this is not so in Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding. Life, death, and the quest for the thin strand in between is put on display in a prolonged study of thanatology on parade. In this world, everything is very weird because death is treated as everyday. Not only does the game freely admit death's existence, it chooses to explore the end we all must surely face. For you and I both will die. Death Stranding, a dance with death. What you're about to hear is a completely massive, all-encompassing spoiler for the entire endgame. Seriously, if you have not played it, you should go do that first. I'll wait here until you do, ready to unpack the story. The setup. This game is convoluted, so buckle up. Starting with extinction entities. In the game and throughout Earth's history, scientists point to 5 major extinction events, such as the dinosaurs being wiped out by a comet. Never mind the latest articles claiming that there was an earlier extinction event. Found a couple of those, bringing the total to 6. In the game, there are 5. We also find out in the game that These are affected by mysterious beings known as extinction entities. Extinction entities, EEs for short, are personal beings, not mindless, thoughtless, accidental events. In the game, EEs are beings, which in this case are commanded to initialize disaster. The EEs are trying to make sure that everything is going to die. Hold on to that information. Oh, one more thing. Key to following along in the game is the idea of the thin line between life and death, the thanatological strand, if you will. For the purpose of the game, think about the world of the living as the land and the world of the dead as the sea. The game calls it the seam, the transition zone to whatever existence is beyond this one. Between these two is a thin strand of beach. The waves are always encroaching and receding, making it nearly impossible to tell where the land ends and the sea actually begins, just like life and death. The backstory. Somewhere, perhaps in the early 2000s, near the division between the 20th and 21st centuries, long before she was President of the United States of America, a young 20-something woman named Bridget Strand has uterine cancer. During surgery, she apparently dies on the table and is resurrected, but her soul, the game calls it her ka, stays behind, stranded on the beach. While her body, again, the game calls that her ha, continues in this world. Her soul, ka, does not age, but her body, her ha, does. Since her soul will be visible in this world sometimes, as Bridget ages, she will tell everyone that the young woman they see is her daughter, Amelie. Amelie is actually the beach-stranded soul of Bridget Strand. Shortly after this, Bridget Strand will become the Vice President of the United States, and subsequent to this, the first void out occurs. Either in this first void out or a subsequent one in Manhattan, the president dies, and Bridget becomes the President of the United States of America after the initial void out kills that current president. Also, the president has no soul. Go figure. Bridget's uterine surgery leaves her sterile. Babies. The very embodiment of nascent life is taken from her. Meanwhile, she begins to learn about the beach, which her soul is stranded on, and begins to postulate how to use this beach as a means to create what becomes a chiral network, transcending time by accessing the beach and accessing all of the knowledge of the past and maybe even the future. That's why in 2019, according to a well-reasoned Reddit thread, which is linked in the comments below, Bridget Strand is experimenting on bridge babies, BBs, as the key to unlock and to initialize the chiral network. Chirality is the property of a figure that is not identical to its mirror image. The in-game example is hands. From the thanatological standpoint of the game, the world of the dead may mirror our own, but it is not identical to our own. Bridge babies are babies not quite born by cesarean to brain-dead mothers, who are being kept alive by life support. Extracting these babies, but keeping them in the pre-birth state in the game, means that these babies are neither dead nor alive, and thus can be used to bridge between the two planes. Babies that actually bridge the beach, with one foot not quite in the world of the living, and one foot not quite in the world of the dead. One of these early experimental bridge babies was the son of war veteran Clifford Unger. His beloved wife, Lisa Bridges, was in a vegetative coma, and little BB Sam was being kept alive in a BB pod. His former commander is on staff as security, and he tells Sam that he needs to get the baby out of there today, because tomorrow, this BB is going to be used as a key to initializing the chiral network. During his attempt to escape the hospital with his baby, both Cliff and the baby are shot by Bridget Strand. It's during this moment that a young 20-something woman's soul, on the beach, picks up a dead baby and resurrects him, sending him back to the world of the living. That baby is Sam Bridges. In the midst of it all, the president then adopts this infant, names him Sam, making him Sam Strand. She had one job. So by the time the game actually starts, it is pretty close to the year 2050. Bridget Strand, through force of will, kept the presidency alive as she tries to rebuild and reunite the country using, what else? The chiral network she had helped to create through a plethora of BB experiments. Amelie's job was to bring about the sixth mass extinction on the Earth. But resurrecting Sam throws the balance out of order and accelerates the Death Stranding, in which the departed souls of humans can no longer cross into the figurative ocean, the realm of the dead, and instead become stranded on the beach. These trapped human spirits, stranded on the plane of existence between this life and the afterlife known as the beach, are BTs, or beached things. BTs are essentially antimatter. When antimatter and matter touch, the result is a massive explosion. Thus, when a BT grabs a living human and drags them to the large BTs, the big BTs will swallow them, initiating a void out. Death swallows up life. Thanatology. Get it? Since Amelie resurrected Sam, he is known as a repatriate. Being a repatriate means he can find his way back to his body, which somehow survives these void outs, and thus he never dies. You have to read somewhat between the lines of the multiple dozens of emails and records that Sam receives throughout the game to get more of the story, but Sam grows up, gets married, and his pregnant wife appears to commit suicide. There is suspicion in the gaming community that this was a ruse by Bridget, or was somehow caused by Bridget so that she could harvest a second-generation bridge baby. Sam's baby. The timeline is difficult to rebuild, but at this time, the void outs have pockmarked the country, and perhaps, though we're never told, the rest of the world. We may find out in Death Stranding 2. Sam is not unaffected. Thanatologically speaking, this means of embodying the grief of losing his wife and his unborn child manifests both psychologically and physically. He develops aphanphosmphobia, a morbid fear of being touched. He shuns all human contact and develops a hand-shaped rash anytime he is touched. This cataclysmic shift results in the vaporization of much of human life, but not all of it. The only survivors band themselves together in massive underground cities, or else hide themselves as survivalist preppers in underground shelters scattered throughout the remains of America. It seems these are the ones who had bought and built survival shelters before the Death Stranding. When someone in the cities died, they would take their corpses to an incinerator and burn them to ash so they cannot begin to necrotize and produce a fresh BT. Necrotization is the process of widespread cellular death or whole-body death. Thanatology on parade. For our purposes, recognize that once cellular decay begins, the line, or the strand between life and death, has already been crossed. The forensic question is, where is the strand? This is where Death Stranding finds a good part of its underlying narrative, in Thanatology, the study of death. The actual line between life and death is not as easy to locate as you might think. That's why in May of 2023, I read the National Institutes of Health redefined, for the purpose of clarity, the forensic identification of death as whole brain death, which itself is remarkably difficult to identify. Science is seeking the same thing Kojima is seeking, the strand, the individual line where life crosses over to death. What seems clear as the final state of life or death, the line between them is constantly changing, like the edges of waves on the beach, at least by medical science. The strides of modern medicine continue to progress, making it possible for babies to survive at earlier and earlier points outside the womb. And the other end of life is equally progressing with more and more knowledge about how to keep the body alive in the throes of old age or even in the face of cataclysmic physical trauma. The strand between life and death, like the waves washing ever upon the beach, is difficult even for the brightest minds of our age to clearly define. Someone dancing is clearly alive, while someone decaying is clearly dead. Finding the line between them is the realm of Thanatology. Thus, the themes that fill the hours of Sam trudging through Timefall delivering packages are a constant exploration of Thanatology, the purpose of life and the essence of death, as well as sometimes imperceptibly asking the question, what lies behind it all? What, after all, is in the game's ocean? That is the realm of theology. The theology of Death Stranding. While theology proper is the study of God, the field of theology also addresses all of the arenas that God touches. This includes life and death, authority, spiritual beings, creation, destruction, and everything in between. This is partially why Thomas Aquinas called theology the queen of science. and why the world's historically greatest scientists have taken their cues from the Christian religion, from Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Boyle, Francis Bacon, Oppenheimer, and more, all believed that the rational, scientifically observable world was thus because it was rationally created by a rational creator. They believed that since God was rational, his world should be too, meaning we can discover it if only we observe carefully. Thus, they all believed that observing the world, asking it questions, and questing for answers was a means of, as Johannes Kepler put it, when he was involved in his research, thinking God's thoughts after him. In the world of Death Stranding, God is rarely mentioned unless perhaps in an exclamation, such as a scene where you arrive at the distribution center west of Capital Knot City in the early game.
You just might be the answer to my prayers.
Then again, there's Higgs, Peter Englert, who chooses to derive the appellative from the Higgs boson particle, a subatomic particle dubbed by scientists as the God particle that permeates all existence. It's merely a moniker, not a theological statement, however. Nevertheless, theology weaves its way into the story. An email mentions a priest, at least giving a hat tip to generic religion, and another email discusses thanatological elements of humanity in terms of the body and spirit, the ha and the ka of humanity from the ancient Egyptian perspective. In this post-apocalyptic world, science has taken observation that BTs exist, and the anti-supernaturalism of the modern era falls to the wayside as science becomes involved in the supernatural. As one Reddit user put it, science became religious. Interwoven through the emails and the symbolism of the game are touches of Christianity, Buddhism, and certainly in Higgs, as well as in some of the emails, the ancient Egyptians who treated Pharaoh as a god. Small g. If you note the head wrappings and the chiralium gold death mask that Higgs wears, it's very reminiscent of the pharaohs on purpose. Finding the Termini, creation and destruction. If we're going to investigate the end of all things, the death side of Thanatology, in a game like this, it would be unexpected if the game never addressed the life side, specifically the other extreme, the creation aspect. If you want to sound like a scholar, you can put it in Latin. The terminus a quo is the earliest limiting point when life begins. The terminus ad quem, total death and destruction, the end of the universe. When does one transform to the other? Terminus a quo, the novelist's son. It just so happens that there is a creation idea that weaves its way, unnoticed by most, into the story. When you finally meet and begin to level up the novelist's son, he appears at first blush to me to be somebody who enjoys a little bit too much long bottom leaf, if you know what I mean. He also seems to have had quite the fascination with gourds. I routinely thought that was supremely odd until a few months ago I stumbled upon a video by Max Darrett named Sekiro and Elden Ring, an undiscovered, mind-blowing connection. It is linked in the description below. You really should watch it. He didn't realize it, but he helped me to unpack the creation theology behind the novelist's son's fascination with gourds. His video will speak for itself, but in my own very rude summary, or interpretation of Max's video, in Eastern alchemy, deriving in part from Chinese Taoism, the gourd becomes a microcosm of all of creation, the cosmos in miniature. In this gourd-shaped microcosm resides the source of life and youth. In it is the prima materia which give rise to life. Possessing it means you possess life itself. So the gourd-infested ramblings of the novelist's son are focusing on the creation and the side of life of Thanatology, while the rest of the game from the BTs onward is focused on the death side of Thanatology. The Thanatological line is somewhere indiscernible between. Terminus ad quem, Amelie. With creation being represented by the gourds, nothing and no one represents the finality of death more thoroughly than Amelie. That is, after all, her job. She uses Sam to connect not only the cities or the knots across America, but also to connect all the various beaches to hers, initializing the last stranding, an utter and complete destruction more complete than any extinction event before, total annihilation of all life completely. In every way, Amelie is the terminus ad quem of death. There's nothing else once she does her job. We're going to come back to Amelie later, but with the outer edges established, we can begin to move inward. The line between life and death. The line between life and death is explored in several different characters in Death Stranding. Deadman, the soulless meat puppet. Deadman is yet another thanatological investigation we need only touch on briefly. He is born, he says, of parts of cadavers. He claims to have no soul, no life, and he spends his time in the company of the dead. In Deadman, we stand asking the question, what really is life? For Deadman, the answer becomes relationships. A fulfilling life, we find out, is wrapped up not in our various pursuits, but in the relationships we have around us. As Deadman builds relationships in BB-28 and Sam, he begins to really feel alive. Fragile. Fragile could be an entire episode all on her own. But in Fragile, the answer to the meaning of life comes down to sacrifice. She willingly sacrificed her body to the ravages of timefall to save the lives of others. While reviled as a traitor by those not knowing the truth, she rises as a hero who, throughout the game, will give herself up for others. A meaningful life is a life of sacrifice for others. But we still don't know about death. Mama and Lockne. The line grows closer to scrutiny in Mama. Her real name is Malingen, and her twin sister, Lockne. Mama and Lockne explores a mysterious mythological link between twins. What happens if one dies and the other lives? When Sam finally meets Mama, he discovers she's nursing a baby BT. When at last their connection is severed, Mama finishes dying. But her body does not necrotize. She approaches the edge of the line between life and death and appears even to cross over, but instead is reunited with her twin sister, resulting, interestingly enough, in a manifestation of heterochromia. It seems we nearly but not so nearly find the line between life and death in Mama. The Elder. I'll mention the Elder only in passing, but for his obscurity, he plays a major role. The Elder is a prepper living high up on a mountain that's difficult to reach. When Sam first meets him, he's almost out of medication. As Sam levels the prepper up, after level 5, the prepper will at some point take his last pill and die, becoming a friendly BT who will not attack Sam and still allowing Sam the ability to rest in his shelter. Sam Porter Bridges. Unsurprisingly, everything seems to come down to Sam. The Terminus a quo and a Quem swirl around our main character. He's the baby killed by Bridget and brought back to life by Amelie. Don't miss the irony that the person claiming to save life takes Sam's, and the same person declared to destroy life saves Sam's. It seems the line, the strand between life and death is a tightrope that Sam himself is walking. At least once at the beginning of the game, more often if you lose a fight, he dies, but as a repatriate, he comes back, because he cannot die. While Deadman is stuck living as a creation from death, Sam is stuck living as well. While I might be inclined to see Sam's inability to die as kind of a superpower, Sam doesn't seem impressed. He's clearly irritated by it, and his violent reaction to repatriation every time serves to indicate the pain of the process. Like Heartman, he can cross the line back and forth, but the line itself remains elusive. Heartman. If Sam only crosses the line between life and death because he trips over it, Heartman is crossing it in a carefully orchestrated, timed to the second clinical laboratory experiment. Heartman is the intentional thanatologist. Nobody embodies the quest for understanding life and death in this game more than Heartman. Every 21 minutes he dies, ventures onto the beach in a quest to find his family, and resuscitates due to a continually worn AED machine. He continually crosses the thanatological line back and forth, and his heart is physically deformed in the process, perhaps a subtle warning that those who toy with death draw closer to it, or more likely an attempt to comfort us in our own journey, a subtle way of encouraging us to understand that death is not the end. But what that end then might really entail, nowhere in the game does it claim to say. The question continues to hang out there like a drifting BT, devoid of substance and almost too dangerous to investigate. But someone did investigate it. Thoroughly. In the Bridge Baby program. BB-28. Lou. While the gourds entail creation in a gourd shell, not nutshell, so gourd. Get it? Oh, okay, bad joke. And Amelie literally embodies death, the line remains. In their own way, every character points to that line between life and death. And this is the line that Sam trips over, Heartman walks over, and yet it remains somewhere in the middle. and only one person in the game stands, or shall I say floats, right on top of it, BB-28. According to the game, BB isn't really alive. She's not quite in the land of the living, but she isn't dead either, though the realm of the dead is manifest to her and through her. BB is the bridge, just as a bridge crosses over a river and is thus on the river. BB-28 is on the line. Like all bridge babies, she's born to a still mother. Somewhere, connected to the network, a woman lies brain dead in a PVS. For all practical purposes, being dead, but having a body kept alive by machines. Like all BBs, she's harvested from her still mother at about 7 months and placed into a pod that simulates the conditions of the womb. While the records of her various deployments have largely been scrubbed, we find her first in the property of Igor Frank, who throws her to Sam just before he's absorbed by a BT, resulting in the void out at the start of the game. Sam begins using BB as a tool at the beginning of the game, but grows accustomed to her presence as the game progresses. He and his wife Lucy had intended to name their baby Louise. When they die in the Manhattan void out, that dream is gone. But Sam begins to grow attached to BB-28, naming her Lou. I would argue he begins to recognize the person who is already there. But she remains on that line throughout the game, or at least for as long as you can possibly delay the last order. BB-28 crosses the line in what, for many, including myself, is the most emotionally charged scene in the game. I'm not crying, you're crying. Ultimately, though, BB-28's story doesn't answer the question the game asks. Where's the line between life and death? It seems nobody knows. Deadman's created life from the dead. Sam is life that cannot fully die, and Lou begins her life. Heartman's family had proceeded off into the ocean while he himself was dragged away from the beach back towards life. It seems no matter how closely you examine the beach, the other side remains elusive. That is where God comes in. Where is God in Death Stranding? On one level, Kojima doesn't include God in the game at all, whether on purpose or not, but that doesn't mean that God isn't there. The prior mentions of God throughout the game do nothing, really, to give more than a hat tip to religion of any particular flavor. But still, there is one more thing. During the endgame dialogues, which do indeed go on for a very long time, Amelie talks about being an extinction entity who's rebelling against the demand that she bring about the final extinction. She indicates that the other extinction entities are expecting her to do so, but there's also a phrase that indicates that she cannot change the orders she's given.
If I had just done my job, none of this would have happened.
She has to complete them, but she can metaphorically drag her feet by staying behind on the beach and holding off the final bang for a long, long time. It must be working because in the final order, we find a regular old rainbow and not a BT in sight. The end will come and she will bring it, but just not right now. I find it intriguing that this powerful being, this extinction entity, is under orders from someone or something more powerful than she is. I would argue that whatever you call that thing, that being in charge of her, is God. Whoever the greatest power ultimately is God. The one Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Somebody has to come first. This is where I would beg your patience to do just a tiny bit of comparative theology. Amelie's claims and her rebellion fit very nicely with a little understood concept in Christianity, or at least little understood outside the realm of scholars who find it easier to talk to each other in the ivory tower than to talk to somebody in their living room. The God who orders the entities. According to the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verse 8, after the flood, when the humans once again decide to rebel by seeking to access the place and the power of God on their own terms, that is, after all, the function of the Tower of Babel, to recreate the mountain upon which gods sit and rule, God scattered them and assigned to the peoples of the earth various members of his management team. We thoughtlessly call them angels, scholars call them the divine council, and God called them gods. Psalm 82 in the Old Testament shows the great God Yahweh holding court over at least some of these beings, the ones who had rebelled. It seems that God had given them the task of guiding the nations with justice till they returned to him. Instead, they had miscarried justice and sought worship as gods themselves. They rebelled choosing not to do God's bidding, and in turn, God vowed that they would die like humans do. It's not a topic for this video, but that is exactly what Jesus did when he conquered death. He led captive a host of captives. That is, he imprisoned the rebellious powers, stripped them of their authority. That's why one of my favorite authors called Jesus the destroyer of gods. It's pretty metal, isn't it? In the world of Death Stranding, Amelie is just another powerful entity who chooses to rebel against the far more powerful being who has given her orders to annihilate the human race. I don't think for a moment that Hideo Kojima has any of this in mind, or that any of this will be developed in Death Stranding 2. This is just a little dabble of comparative theology, taking what I know and viewing Death Stranding through my own worldview. I, for one, will be playing DS2 just to enjoy the game, but I'll bet I also start to see hidden in the Thanatology on parade the subtle hints of theology peeking out around the corners. I hope you enjoyed my meandering thoughts as I contemplated the intersection of worldview, comparative theology, and video games. If you'd like to delve into more topics like these, I hope you'll both like and subscribe, as I've got more journeys like this one planned for the future. Thanks for playing. I'm the Preacher, and I hope to see you the next time.
Game over, man. Place is a crater.